The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Courtroom 3B in the Maricopa County Family Court, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Judge Patricia Williams adjusted her reading glasses and looked down at the small figure seated in the witness chair. A sight that made her heart clench with concern. 7-year-old Emma Martinez sat rigidly upright, her small hands gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Beside her, pressed against her legs like a furry guardian angel, lay Atlas, a magnificent golden retriever whose intelligent amber eyes seemed to mirror the child's anxiety. Judge Williams had presided over family court for 15 years, handling hundreds of custody disputes, adoption hearings, and child welfare cases. She'd seen children cry, rage, and plead. She'd witnessed kids as young as 5 eloquently express their preferences about which parent they wanted to live with. But never, not once in her entire career, had she encountered a child who had remained completely, utterly silent for 3 consecutive hours. The courtroom was unusually packed for a custody hearing. Word had somehow spread through the courthouse that something unusual was happening in Judge Williams' courtroom. Court clerks, bailiffs from other departments, and even a few attorneys from neighboring courtrooms had found reasons to slip in and observe. The tension in the room was so thick it felt suffocating. At the plaintiff's table sat Marcus Martinez, Emma's father, looking every inch the successful businessman he was. His $3,000 suit was perfectly tailored, his silver hair immaculately styled, and his posture radiated the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. Beside him, his attorney, Rebecca Harrison from one of Phoenix's most prestigious law firms, shuffled through a thick stack of documents that painted Marcus as the ideal parent, financially stable, with a beautiful home in Scottsdale, excellent schools in the district, and a lifestyle that could provide Emma with every advantage. In stark contrast, Sarah Martinez sat in the gallery behind the defendant's table, her modest dress wrinkled from nervous fidgeting, tissues clutched in her trembling hands. Her attorney, an overworked public defender named David Chun, had warned her that the odds were stacked against her. 6 months earlier, she'd lost primary custody when Marcus's legal team successfully argued that her job loss and subsequent eviction made her an unstable guardian. The temporary custody arrangement had allowed Emma to live with Marcus while Sarah rebuilt her life, working 2 jobs to afford a small apartment and fighting for supervised visitation rights. "Emma, sweetheart," Judge Williams said, her voice gentle and warm, leaning forward in her chair to appear less intimidating. "I know this is scary, but I need to ask you some questions. Can you tell me how you've been feeling about living with your daddy?" Emma's response was to stare more intently at Atlas, her small fingers beginning to move through his golden fur in what appeared to be nervous fidgeting. The dog remained perfectly still, his training evident in his calm demeanor despite the tension radiating from the child. "Your Honor," Marcus's attorney interjected smoothly, "perhaps the child is simply overwhelmed by the formal setting. Mr. Martinez has been providing excellent care for Emma. She attends one of Scottsdale's finest private schools, has access to the best health care, and lives in a beautiful home with her own room, complete with toys and everything a little girl could want." Judge Williams held up a hand to silence the attorney, her experienced eyes never leaving Emma's face. Something was very wrong here, and every instinct she'd developed over decades of working with children was screaming at her to pay attention. "Emma," she tried again, "would you like some water? Are you feeling okay?" The child's only response was to move her hand in a different pattern across Atlas's head, 3 quick scratches, then a pause, then 2 more scratches. The dog's ears perked up slightly, his body shifting almost imperceptibly. Dr. Maria Santos, the court-appointed child psychologist, cleared her throat from her seat in the jury box. "Your Honor, if I may approach?" Judge Williams nodded, and the gray-haired woman walked over to Emma's chair. "Hello, Emma. I'm Dr. Santos. We met last week, remember? I have some crayons and paper. Would you like to draw me a picture instead of talking? But Emma shook her head slightly, the first movement she'd made other than the strange finger patterns in Atlas's fur. Her dark eyes darted quickly toward her father, then immediately back to the dog, and Judge Williams caught the fleeting expression of what looked distinctly like fear. Marcus shifted in his chair, his perfect composure showing the first crack of irritation. Your Honor, surely we can't base a custody decision on a child's refusal to cooperate with the court. Emma is clearly just being stubborn. Children her age often act out when they don't get their way. I assure you, she's perfectly fine at home. But Judge Williams was watching Emma's face when her father spoke, and she saw the child flinch almost imperceptibly. Atlas seemed to sense it too, his body tensing slightly as Emma's fingers moved in another sequence. Scratch, scratch, tap, scratch across his head. Jennifer Chun, Emma's guardian ad litem, stood up from her seat. Your Honor, might I request a brief recess? I'd like to consult with my client privately. Emma, Judge Williams said softly, ignoring the request for a moment. You don't have to be afraid. Everyone in this room wants what's best for you. Atlas is a very beautiful dog. Is he your special friend? For the first time, Emma's rigid posture softened slightly, and she nodded. Her hand continued its strange movements through Atlas's fur, and the dog remained perfectly still, as if he understood something the humans in the room did not. The packed courtroom watched in complete silence, sensing they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple custody dispute, though none of them yet understood what that something was. 15-minute recess, Judge Williams announced, her voice carrying a note of determination that made several attorneys look up sharply. Something was very wrong here, and she was going to find out what. When court reconvened after the 15-minute recess, Judge Patricia Williams noticed that Emma had not moved from her position in the witness chair. The little girl sat with the same rigid posture, her dark eyes fixed on Atlas, as if the golden retriever held all the answers to questions no one else knew how to ask. The packed courtroom settled into an expectant silence, everyone sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Thank you all for your patience, Judge Williams began, her voice carrying the authority that came from years of handling difficult cases. Emma, I hope you're feeling a little better now. Are you ready to talk to us? Emma's response was the same as before, complete silence. But this time, Judge Williams was watching more carefully, and she noticed something that made her lean forward in her chair with growing concern. Every time Marcus Martinez spoke, shifted in his seat, or even cleared his throat, Emma's hand moved to Atlas's head in a very specific pattern. It wasn't random nervous fidgeting as she had initially assumed. The movements were deliberate, precise, almost ritualistic. Marcus's attorney, Rebecca Harrison, stood up with practiced confidence. Your Honor, my client has been more than patient with this proceeding. Mr. Martinez is a devoted father who has provided exemplary care for Emma over the past 6 months. The child's behavior today appears to be nothing more than a manipulation tactic, likely coached by objection. David Chun, Sarah's public defender, jumped to his feet. Counsel is making unfounded accusations. Sustained, Judge Williams said firmly, but her attention never wavered from Emma. As the attorneys had their brief exchange, she watched the child's fingers move across Atlas's fur in what she was now certain was a deliberate pattern. Scratch, tap, scratch, scratch, tap. The sequence repeated itself with mechanical precision whenever Marcus or his attorney spoke. Court stenographer Linda Martinez, no relation to the family, had been transcribing court proceedings for over 20 years. She prided herself on her attention to detail, not just for the spoken word, but for the subtle dynamics that played out in courtrooms. Today, she found herself distracted from her typing by the strange behavior of the little girl in the witness chair. Linda had noticed the pattern too, and being a dog owner herself, she recognized that Atlas was not behaving like a typical pet. The retriever's responses were too controlled, too purposeful. During a brief pause in the proceedings, Linda caught the eye of bailiff Tom Rodriguez and nodded toward Emma. Tom, a veteran of family court who had seen every kind of custody battle imaginable, began paying closer attention to the interaction between child and dog. What he observed made his hand unconsciously move to his radio, though he wasn't sure why his instincts were telling him that something was very wrong. "Mr. Martinez," Judge Williams said, deciding to take a more direct approach, "can you tell the court about Emma's daily routine when she's in your care?" Marcus straightened in his chair, his confident smile returning. "Certainly, Your Honor. Emma has a wonderful routine at my home. She wakes up at 7, has breakfast prepared by my housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez. She attends Scottsdale Prep Academy, one of the finest schools in Arizona. After school, she does her homework, has dinner, and we spend quality time together before bedtime." As Marcus spoke, Emma's movements became more agitated. The scratching pattern intensified: scratch, scratch, tap, scratch dash, tap, 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 scratch. Atlas remained perfectly still, but his intelligent eyes seemed to grow more alert with each signal. The dog's ears pricked forward slightly, and his breathing changed in a way that only someone very familiar with canine behavior would notice. Dr. Maria Santos, watching from the jury box, felt a chill run down her spine. In her 30 years of working with traumatized children, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to recognize when a child was in distress, even when they couldn't or wouldn't verbalize it. Emma's body language was screaming something that the adults in the room weren't hearing. "Emma enjoys our time together," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a slightly defensive tone as he noticed the judge's intense scrutiny. "We watch movies, play games. She has everything a child could want: her own iPad, a beautiful bedroom with a canopy bed, toys, clothes. I don't understand why she's acting this way today." The moment Marcus said, "We watch movies," Emma's entire body tensed visibly. Her hand moved in a new pattern across Atlas's fur, rapid, almost frantic scratching, followed by 3 distinct taps. The golden retriever's response was immediate and subtle. His muscles coiled as if preparing to move, though he remained in his lying position. Jennifer Chun, Emma's guardian ad litem, had been taking notes throughout the hearing, but now she found herself sketching the patterns she was observing. As someone trained in child advocacy, she knew that children communicated in many ways beyond words, especially children who had experienced trauma. The consistency of Emma's movements was too deliberate to be coincidental. "Your Honor," Jennifer said, rising from her seat, "I'm noticing some concerning patterns in my client's behavior. Might I request permission to consult with a specialist who has experience with?" "There's nothing wrong with Emma that a stable home environment won't cure," Marcus interrupted, his polished demeanor showing the first signs of strain. "She's been through a lot with the divorce and her mother's instability. Children act out. It's normal." But as Marcus spoke those words, something extraordinary happened. Emma looked directly at her father for the first time all day, and her small hand moved in what appeared to be the most complex sequence yet. Scratch dash scratch dash tap dash tap dash tap dash tap dash scratch dash scratch. Atlas immediately shifted his position, moving slightly closer to Emma's chair in what could only be described as a protective stance. Judge Williams felt every instinct she had developed over her career suddenly align in a moment of crystal clarity. This wasn't a custody dispute. This was something else entirely. The patterns, the dog's responses, the child's fear, it all pointed to a truth that was trying desperately to surface. "I'm calling for an extended recess," Judge Williams announced, her voice carrying an edge that made everyone in the courtroom pay attention. "I want to meet with counsel and the child's advocates in my chambers immediately." As the courtroom began to empty, Emma remained in her chair, her hand never stopping its strange communication with Atlas. The golden retriever sat up now, fully alert, as if sensing that their secret language was finally about to be understood. Judge Patricia Williams' chambers felt smaller than usual as the key players in Emma's case filed in during the extended recess. The oak-paneled room, usually a place of quiet deliberation, now hummed with tension and unspoken questions. Jennifer Chun, Emma's guardian ad litem, clutched a manila folder to her chest with trembling hands, while Dr. Maria Santos settled into one of the leather chairs facing the judge's imposing desk. David Chun, Sarah's attorney, looked overwhelmed by the gravity of what he sensed was unfolding. "Jennifer," Judge Williams said, removing her reading glasses and rubbing her tired eyes, "I need you to tell me everything you know about that dog. And I mean everything. What I witnessed in that courtroom wasn't normal pet behavior." Jennifer's face had gone pale during the recess, and she now opened her folder with hands that shook slightly. "Your Honor, I've been dreading this moment, but I think it's time you knew the full story about Atlas and why Emma was assigned to him." She pulled out a thick file marked with juvenile court seals and confidential stamps. 8 months ago, Emma was brought to Phoenix Children's Hospital by her school nurse, Jennifer began, her voice barely above a whisper. She had bruises on her arms and what appeared to be rope burns on her wrists. When questioned, Emma claimed she had fallen from her bicycle, but the pattern of injuries was inconsistent with that explanation. Dr. Santos leaned forward, her professional instincts fully engaged. What did the medical evaluation reveal? The doctors found evidence of repeated trauma-old bruises in various stages of healing, signs of chronic stress, and what child psychologists call learned helplessness. Emma had essentially shut down emotionally. She stopped talking about her home life, stopped playing with other children, and began having severe anxiety attacks whenever certain topics came up. Judge Williams felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. And Atlas? Jennifer flipped through several pages of documentation. Atlas isn't just any service dog, Your Honor. He's part of an experimental program run by the Southwest Center for Traumatized Children. He was specifically trained to work with children who have experienced severe psychological trauma and have lost the ability to communicate their distress through normal channels. The judge's mind raced back to the patterns she had observed in the courtroom. The movements Emma was making, those weren't random, were they? No, Your Honor. Atlas is trained to recognize and respond to 27 different hand signals that correspond to various levels and types of distress. The program was developed for children who have been so traumatized that they develop selective mutism or find other ways to communicate when speaking becomes impossible. Dr. Santos pulled out her own notebook, which was filled with quick sketches she had made during the hearing. "I documented several distinct patterns. This one," she pointed to a sequence of scratches and taps. Emma repeated this one consistently whenever her father spoke. Jennifer's face grew even more grave as she consulted a laminated card from her file. According to the signal guide provided by Atlas's trainers, that particular sequence means threat present or danger identified. It's one of the most urgent distress signals in the dog's vocabulary. Room fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. Judge Williams stood and walked to her window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline while processing what she had just learned. "You're telling me that for the past 3 hours, that little girl has been signaling to her dog that she's in danger, and we've all been sitting there thinking she was just being difficult?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, Your Honor," Jennifer replied. "But there's more. Atlas isn't just trained to recognize distress signals. He's also trained to provide specific responses that help the child feel safe and to escalate his protective behavior if the threat level increases." David Chun, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up with alarm. Are you saying that dog has been trying to protect Emma from her own father this entire time? Jennifer nodded grimly. Atlas's training includes threat assessment. If Emma signals that someone is dangerous, the dog is programmed to position himself between the child and the perceived threat. I noticed during the hearing that Atlas moved closer to Emma and changed his posture several times, always in response to her signals. Dr. Santos flipped through her notes again. I observed at least 6 distinct patterns during the hearing. If each one represents a different type of communication, ... double quotes. She trailed off, the implications too horrifying to voice. There's something else, Jennifer continued, her voice now barely audible. The reason Emma was assigned Atlas 8 months ago, the incident that triggered the evaluation, occurred during one of her court-ordered visits with her father. She was found by a neighbor, wandering the street at 2 in the morning, barefoot and in her pajamas, claiming she couldn't remember how she got there. Judge Williams turned back to face the room, her expression hard as steel. And the official report? Marcus claimed Emma had been sleepwalking due to stress from the divorce. The investigating officer found no evidence of wrongdoing, and Emma couldn't or wouldn't provide any details about what had happened. The case was closed, but Child Protective Services recommended the service dog as a precautionary measure. The judge felt pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. So Emma developed this communication system as a survival mechanism? That's our assessment, Dr. Santos confirmed. Children who experience ongoing trauma often develop sophisticated coping mechanisms. If Emma felt she couldn't safely speak about what was happening to her, she would naturally seek alternative ways to communicate her distress, especially if she had been threatened or intimidated into silence. Jennifer pulled out one final document from her file. Your Honor, I have the contact information for Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the specialist who oversees Atlas's training program. She's been working with Emma for months and has documented extensive evidence of the child's ability to communicate complex emotional states through the signaling system. Judge Williams returned to her desk and picked up her phone. Get Dr. Martinez on the line immediately. And I want Child Protective Services here within the hour. She paused, looking around the room at the faces of the professionals who had dedicated their careers to protecting children. If what we suspect is true, that little girl has been screaming for help in the only way she felt safe to do so. We failed to listen, but we're going to listen now. As Jennifer made the phone calls, Dr. Santos continued studying her notes. Judge Williams, there's one more thing. Some of the signals I observed today were new patterns I hadn't seen in the first part of the hearing. If Emma's distress is escalating, Atlas may respond by increasing his protective behavior. What does that mean, exactly? It means, Dr. Santos said quietly, that dog may try to physically prevent Emma from being returned to her father's custody. And given his training, he might be willing to do whatever it takes to keep her safe. Weight of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. They weren't just dealing with a custody dispute anymore, they were potentially in the middle of a child abuse case, where the only witness was a 7-year-old girl who could only speak through signals to a dog trained to protect her at all costs. Dr. Rebecca Martinez arrived at the courthouse within 40 minutes, her emergency response team in tow. As the lead specialist for the Southwest Center for Traumatized Children and Atlas's primary trainer, she moved with the urgency of someone who understood that a child's life might hang in the balance. Judge Williams had cleared a conference room adjacent to her chambers, creating a safe space away from both parents where Emma could be properly evaluated. The moment Dr. Martinez saw Emma through the observation window, her professional composure faltered slightly. The little girl sat in the same rigid position she had maintained in the courtroom, her small frame dwarfed by the adult-sized chair, while Atlas lay pressed against her legs in what Dr. Martinez immediately recognized as a protective formation. How long has she been signaling? Dr. Martinez asked Jennifer Chun, pulling out a tablet loaded with video analysis software and signal interpretation charts. Almost 4 hours now, Jennifer replied. The patterns have been consistent, but they seem to be intensifying. Dr. Martinez observed Emma through the one-way glass for several minutes, her trained eye cataloging each movement. She's cycling through multiple distress signals. That's not typical behavior for the children in our program, unless ... double quotes. She paused, her face growing pale. Unless the threat is immediate and present. Judge Williams joined them at the observation window. Dr. Martinez, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. If Emma has been trying to tell us that her father poses a danger to her, we need to know immediately. Can you communicate with her directly? Atlas and Emma have developed what we call an extended vocabulary, Dr. Martinez explained, setting up her equipment. Beyond the basic 27 signals we taught them, traumatized children often create additional signals specific to their situation. Emma and Atlas have been working together for 8 months. They may have developed signals we've never documented. Dr. Maria Santos, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Doctor, is it safe for us to enter the room? I don't want to cause Emma additional distress. Atlas is trained to assess threat levels for new individuals. Dr. Martinez replied. If he perceives any of us as safe, he'll remain calm. But if Emma signals that she feels threatened by anyone in the room, Atlas will position himself accordingly. I need to warn you, all his protective responses can be quite pronounced. With careful coordination, the small team entered the conference room. Emma looked up when Dr. Martinez approached, and for the first time in hours, her rigid posture relaxed slightly. Atlas's tail gave a single, almost imperceptible wag, a sign that he recognized his trainer and felt safe. Hello, Emma, Dr. Martinez said softly, settling into a chair across from the child. Atlas looks like he's been taking very good care of you today. Can you tell me how you're feeling? Emma's response was immediate. Her hands began moving in the familiar patterns, but now Dr. Martinez could interpret them in real time. She's saying, scared, danger, help. The doctor translated for the others. Emma, can you show me where the danger is? Emma's eyes darted toward the door, leading back to the courtroom. Then she began a new sequence of signals that made Dr. Martinez's breath catch. The child's movements were rapid, desperate scratch, tap tap, scratch scratch tap, followed by pointing toward the courtroom. What is she saying? Judge Williams asked urgently. Dr. Martinez consulted her tablet, cross-referencing the signals with their database. The pointing combined with that signal sequence. She's identifying a specific person as the source of danger. But this next pattern, ... She watched as Emma repeated a complex series of movements. This is new. I've never seen this combination before. Atlas suddenly rose to his feet, his professional training evident as he moved between Emma and the door. His hackles weren't raised, but his body language had shifted to full alert status. Emma, Dr. Martinez said gently, I'm going to show you some pictures, and I want you to signal to Atlas if you feel safe or unsafe. Can you do that for me? Dr. Martinez pulled out a set of photos, generic images of different scenarios that were used in therapy sessions. But when she showed Emma a picture of a man and child watching television together, the little girl's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her hands flew to Atlas's head in a frantic pattern that made the dog immediately move closer, his training kicking into high protective mode. Dear God, Dr. Martinez whispered, recognizing the signals. Emma, did someone hurt you when you were watching movies? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face for the first time all day. Then she began the most complex signal sequence Dr. Martinez had ever witnessed, a combination of standard distress signals and what appeared to be Emma's own created vocabulary that told a story too horrible for a 7-year-old to have experienced. Jennifer Chun was taking notes frantically. Can you interpret what she's saying? She's describing specific incidents, Dr. Martinez replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. The movie signal, combined with these other patterns. Emma, did this happen more than once? Emma nodded again, then held up her hands, fingers extended, then made the gesture several more times. Dr. Martinez's face went ashen as she realized Emma was trying to indicate frequency. How many times, sweetheart? Dr. Martinez asked gently. Emma's response was to continue the counting gesture, over and over, until Dr. Martinez had to stop her. That's enough, honey. You're safe now. Judge Williams had been watching this exchange with growing horror and rage. What exactly is she telling us? Emma has been systematically abused during her court-ordered visits with her father, Dr. Martinez said bluntly. The signals indicate repeated incidents of what I can only describe as severe psychological and physical trauma, occurring primarily during times when they were supposedly having quality time, together watching movies, playing games. Dr. Santos leaned forward. The rope burns from 8 months ago? Part of a pattern that's been ongoing, Dr. Martinez confirmed. Emma developed this extended signal vocabulary because she was threatened into silence, but desperately needed a way to communicate what was happening to her. Atlas became her voice when she couldn't safely use her own. As if sensing that his secret was finally being understood, Atlas moved even closer to Emma, resting his large head on her small lap. The gesture was so gentle, so protective, that it brought tears to the eyes of every adult in the room. Emma, Judge Williams said softly, kneeling down to the child's eye level, no one is going to let anyone hurt you ever again. Do you understand me? Emma looked directly at the judge and gave a small nod, then placed both her hands on Atlas's head in what Dr. Martinez recognized as the signal for safe and thank you. For the first time in 8 months, Emma Martinez smiled. The conference room had transformed into an impromptu crisis center as Child Protective Services investigator. Sarah Hendricks arrived with her emergency response team. Detective Maria Vasquez from the Phoenix Police Department's Special Victims Unit followed closely behind, her notebook already out and her expression grim. What had begun as a routine custody hearing was rapidly evolving into a criminal investigation of the worst kind. Dr. Rebecca Martinez had spent the last hour documenting Emma's signals with clinical precision, but the weight of what she was recording was evident in her trembling hands. Judge Williams, she said, looking up from her tablet where she had been cataloging the child's communications, I need to prepare you for what Emma is about to reveal. Some of these signal combinations, I've only seen them in our most severe cases. Emma sat in the child-sized chair that had been brought in, looking tiny but somehow stronger now that she was surrounded by people who finally understood her language. Atlas remained pressed against her side, his golden fur damp from her tears, his intelligent eyes never leaving her face. The dog's demeanor had shifted from protective alertness to what could only be described as emotional support mode. Detective Vasquez knelt down to Emma's eye level, her voice gentle but professional. Emma, my name is Detective Vasquez. I work with children who have been hurt, and I want to help make sure you're safe. Dr. Martinez tells me that you and Atlas have a very special way of talking. Can you help me understand what happened during your visits with your daddy? Emma's small hands began moving through Atlas's fur, and Dr. Martinez provided real-time translation. She's saying Daddy's scary and hurt Emma, the doctor interpreted. Now she's indicating frequency. Again, this appears to be many times. Sarah Hendricks from CPS pulled out her tablet to begin official documentation. Emma, we need to understand exactly what your father did that scared you. Can you show Atlas what happened? What followed was the most difficult hour any of the professionals in that room had ever witnessed. Through her intricate signal system with Atlas, Emma began to reveal a pattern of abuse It was both systematic and escalating. Her small fingers moved through increasingly complex sequences as she described incidents that had occurred during her court-mandated overnight visits. The movie signal, Dr. Martinez translated, her voice becoming increasingly strained, combined with these restraint indicators. Emma is describing being tied up while being forced to watch inappropriate content. Detective Vasquez's pen moved rapidly across her notepad. Can she indicate where in the house this occurred? Emma's response was to signal what Dr. Martinez recognized as basement and dark place. Then she added signals that made the doctor pause in horror. She's indicating there were cameras involved, and ... Oh, God. She's signaling that her father told her these were games that special daddies play with their little girls. Judge Williams, who had remained stoically professional throughout her career dealing with the worst of family dysfunction, felt her composure cracking. She stepped out of the room briefly to compose herself, her hands shaking as she realized the magnitude of what they were uncovering. Dr. Maria Santos, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Emma, you mentioned earlier that your daddy said something would happen to your mommy if you told anyone. Can you show Atlas what he said? Emma's signals became more frantic, and Atlas immediately moved closer, his training kicking in as he sensed her escalating distress. Through her movements, Emma revealed that Marcus had explicitly threatened to hurt her mother if she ever told anyone about their special games. He had shown her photos of Sarah, telling Emma that bad things happened to mommies whose little girls couldn't keep secrets. That's why she stopped talking, Dr. Martinez realized aloud. The selective mutism wasn't just trauma-induced, it was strategically chosen. Emma made a conscious decision to protect her mother by finding an alternative way to communicate her distress. Sarah Hendricks was documenting everything on her tablet, building what was clearly going to become a comprehensive case file. Emma, can you tell us about the rope burns on your wrists from 8 months ago? The ones that brought you to the hospital? Emma's response was immediate and heartbreaking. She demonstrated to Atlas how her father had tied her hands, ostensibly as part of a game, but the signals she used indicated pain, fear, and helplessness. She showed how she had managed to escape that particular night, running barefoot through the neighborhood until a concerned neighbor found her. The sleepwalking story was a cover, Detective Vasquez concluded grimly. Emma wasn't sleepwalking, she was running for her life. Dr. Martinez consulted her notes again. There's more. Emma, you've been signaling about photographs and videos. Can you tell us more about that? The little girl's response made every adult in the room feel physically sick. Through her signals, Emma indicated that her father had been documenting the abuse, creating what appeared to be an extensive collection of material. She showed Atlas signals that Dr. Martinez interpreted as Daddy's computer and secret files. Judge Williams returned to the room, her professional demeanor restored, but her eyes blazing with controlled fury. Detective Vasquez, I assume you're preparing search warrants? Already in motion, Your Honor. We'll have Marcus Martinez's home, office, and electronic devices secured within hours. If what Emma is telling us is accurate, we're looking at multiple felony charges, including child sexual abuse, production of child pornography, and aggravated assault. Emma, seeming to understand that the adults finally believed her, began signaling more freely. She revealed details about threats made against other children, suggesting that she might not have been Marcus's only victim. She described being shown photographs of other little girls, with her father telling her that these children had also learned to play his special games. Dr. Martinez looked up from her tablet, her face pale. Emma is indicating that her father told her about other children who visit him. She's describing a pattern that suggests we may be dealing with a predator who has been using his access to children in family court situations to identify and groom victims. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about Emma. It was potentially about multiple children who had been placed in Marcus Martinez's care through the family court system. Detective Vasquez closed her notebook and stood up. I need to contact the FBI immediately. If Martinez has been using his custody arrangements to access and abuse children, and if he's been producing and potentially distributing documentation of that abuse, we're looking at federal crimes. Emma, finally understanding that she was truly safe, leaned against Atlas and began to sob, not the silent tears of trauma, but the releasing tears of a child who had finally been heard and believed. Atlas, sensing that his job as Emma's secret voice was complete, gently licked her face and settled into a relaxed position for the first time all day. When Judge Patricia Williams called the court back into session 3 hours later, the atmosphere in Courtroom 3B had transformed completely. What had begun as a routine custody hearing now felt like the epicenter of a brewing storm. The gallery, which had been filled with curious courthouse staff and attorneys earlier, was now occupied by a grin-faced assembly of law enforcement officials, child protective services workers, and federal agents who had arrived to coordinate what was rapidly becoming a multi-jurisdictional investigation. Marcus Martinez sat at the plaintiff's table, his earlier confidence replaced by barely concealed agitation. His expensive attorney, Rebecca Harrison, whispered urgently in his ear, clearly sensing that something had shifted dramatically during the extended recess. Marcus's perfectly styled hair showed signs of nervous running of fingers through it, and his tailored suit seemed to hang differently on his frame, as if the weight of impending revelation was physically changing his posture. Emma entered the courtroom flanked by Dr. Rebecca Martinez and Sarah Hendricks from CPS, with Atlas walking calmly beside her. The change in the little girl was immediately apparent to everyone present. While she still held herself with the careful control of a traumatized child, there was something different in her eyes, a spark of hope that hadn't been there hours earlier. More importantly, she was no longer silent. "Daddy hurt me," Emma said clearly as she passed her father's table, her small voice carrying across the hushed courtroom like a thunderclap. A simple statement, spoken aloud for the first time in 8 months, caused an audible gasp from the gallery. Marcus jerked in his chair as if he'd been struck, his face draining of color. Judge Williams took her seat with the gravity of someone who understood that she was about to preside over one of the most significant hearings of her career. Before we proceed, I want to make it clear that this hearing has evolved beyond a simple custody matter. We now have evidence of potential criminal activity that requires immediate attention. Rebecca Harrison shot to her feet. "Your Honor, I object to this characterization. My client has not been formally charged with any crime, and these proceedings should remain focused on the custody arrangement." "Sit down, Counselor," Judge Williams said with steel in her voice. "Your client will have ample opportunity to address these matters through appropriate legal channels. Right now, my primary concern is the safety and welfare of this child." Emma took her place in the witness chair again, but this time, Atlas positioned himself differently. Instead of lying protectively pressed against her legs, he sat beside her chair in what Dr. Martinez had explained was his testimony support position. The difference was subtle, but significant. Atlas was no longer solely focused on protection. He was now providing emotional support for a child ready to speak her truth. "Emma," Judge Williams said gently, "Dr. Martinez has explained to the court that you and Atlas have developed a very special way of communicating. Can you tell us, in your own words, why you stopped talking about your visits with your father?" Emma's voice was small but clear. "Daddy said bad things would happen to Mommy if I told anyone about our games. He showed me pictures of Mommy and said that mommies who can't keep their little girls quiet get hurt." The courtroom was so silent that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Marcus started to rise from his chair, but Detective Vasquez who was seated in the front row of the gallery, made a subtle gesture that caused him to sit back down. "What kind of games, Emma?" Judge Williams asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Games where I had to be very still and quiet," Emma replied, her hand moving to rest on Atlas's head, not in the frantic signaling pattern of earlier, but in a simple gesture of comfort. "Games where Daddy tied my hands so I couldn't move. Games where he took pictures and said I was being a good girl for playing with him." Marcus's attorney grabbed his arm as he started to speak, but he shook her off. "She's making this up," he burst out. "Your Honor, this is clearly a fabrication, coached by her unstable mother. Children make up stories all the time." Emma's reaction to her father's outburst was immediate and telling. She shrank back in her chair, and Atlas instantly rose to his feet, positioning himself between Emma and Marcus's table. The dog's training was evident as he assessed the threat level, his body language shifting to protective mode. "Let the record show," Judge Williams said coldly, "that the child service dog has responded to the defendant's outburst by assuming a protective stance, confirming the training we've learned about regarding threat assessment." Dr. Martinez, who had been given permission to assist with Emma's testimony, spoke up. "Your Honor, Emma has demonstrated the ability to accurately communicate complex traumatic experiences through her signaling system with Atlas. The consistency and detail of her communications over the past several hours indicate that these are not fabricated memories but accurate recollections of repeated traumatic events." Sarah Martinez, Emma's mother, sat in the gallery with tears streaming down her face. "Emma, baby," she called out softly. "Mommy's safe. You can tell them everything. No one's going to hurt Mommy." Emma turned to look at her mother, and for the first time all day, she smiled, a small tentative expression that nonetheless lit up her entire face. "Mommy's really safe?" she asked. "Your mother is completely safe," Judge Williams assured her. "And you're safe too. Mr. Martinez will not be allowed to hurt you or anyone else ever again." With this assurance, Emma's testimony became more detailed and devastating. She described being taken to her father's basement, being restrained and photographed, being shown videos of other children who had supposedly played the same games. She spoke about being told that this was normal behavior between fathers and daughters, but that it had to remain secret because other people wouldn't understand. The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs as Emma continued her testimony. Several people stood up, and Judge Williams had to call for order. Marcus sat motionless, his face a mask of barely controlled panic as his daughter methodically dismantled his carefully constructed facade. "Emma," Detective Vasquez was given permission to ask, "did your father ever mention other children who visited him?" Emma nodded. "He showed me pictures of other little girls. He said they were learning to play the games too. He said some of them lived with their daddies, like I was supposed to live with him." Implications hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Judge Williams turned to Detective Vasquez. "How many other custody cases has Mr. Martinez been involved with?" Marcus's attorney finally managed to regain some composure. "Your Honor, I demand that these proceedings be suspended immediately. My client's due process rights are being violated, and your client's rights will be fully protected in criminal court," Judge Williams interrupted. "Right now, this court's only concern is ensuring that this child and potentially other children are protected from further harm." As Emma concluded her testimony, Atlas moved closer to her chair, sensing that his human's ordeal was finally coming to an end. The little girl reached down and hugged the golden retriever's neck, whispering, "Thank you for helping me tell them. Atlas, thank you for keeping me safe." The courtroom sat in stunned silence, everyone present understanding that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Child finding her voice through the most unlikely of interpreters, and justice finally beginning to emerge from the shadows where it had been hiding for far too long. The moment Emma finished her testimony, Judge Patricia Williams felt the full weight of her judicial authority settle on her shoulders like a mantle of righteous fury. She had spent 15 years on the family court bench, but never had she felt more certain about a decision she was about to make. The evidence was overwhelming, the child's courage was undeniable, and justice demanded immediate action. "Bailiff Rodriguez," Judge Williams commanded, her voice carrying across the hushed courtroom with crystal clarity. "Please place Marcus Martinez in protective custody, pending a full investigation by the Phoenix Police Department and federal authorities." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Rebecca Harrison, Marcus's attorney, shot to her feet so quickly her chair toppled backward. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. You cannot order an arrest based solely on the testimony of a 7-year-old child. My client demands due process." But Marcus Martinez's reaction told a different story entirely. Instead of the righteous indignation of an innocent man, he displayed the cornered desperation of someone whose carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. His face had gone ashen, sweat beading on his forehead despite the courthouse air conditioning. "You can't do this," he shouted, his composure finally shattering completely. "She's lying. Sarah put her up to this. It's all fabricated." Detective Maria Vasquez rose from her seat in the gallery, her handcuffs already in hand. Behind her, 2 additional officers moved into position, their presence a testament to how seriously law enforcement was taking Emma's allegations. "Mr. Martinez, please stand and place your hands behind your back." Emma, still seated in the witness chair, with Atlas pressed protectively against her legs, watched her father's arrest with a mixture of fear and relief playing across her small features. When Marcus's eyes met hers across the courtroom, she instinctively reached for Atlas's head, but this time her touch was gentle, seeking comfort rather than signaling distress. "You're destroying an innocent man's life," Marcus bellowed as Detective Vasquez approached him. "I'm a pillar of this community. I've donated thousands to children's charities. This is insane." Judge Williams stood up behind her bench, her black robe seeming to amplify her authority as she addressed the disruption. "Mr. Martinez, your protests ring hollow in light of what this court has witnessed today. This brave little girl developed an entire language of survival because you terrorized her into silence. Your own actions in this courtroom have confirmed every signal she made to her service dog, Sarah Martinez, who had been sitting in stunned silence throughout her daughter's testimony, finally found her voice. "Emma, baby, look at Mommy," she called out softly. When her daughter turned toward her, Sarah continued, "You were so brave today. You saved yourself, sweetheart. You saved yourself." As Detective Vasquez placed the handcuffs on Marcus, he made one final, desperate attempt to maintain control of the narrative. "Sarah's been coaching her. She's an unfit mother who lost custody for good reason. You're all being manipulated by a vindictive ex-wife." But his words only served to demonstrate exactly why Emma had been too terrified to speak. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, who had been documenting the entire interaction, noted how Atlas immediately moved into a more protective stance at Marcus's raised voice, and how Emma's body language shifted back toward the defensive posture they had observed earlier. FBI agent Jennifer Chung, no relation to Emma's guardian ad litem, stepped forward from where she had been coordinating with local law enforcement. "Your Honor, based on the evidence we've gathered today and Emma's testimony, we have grounds to believe that Mr. Martinez may be part of a larger network targeting children in custody situations. We're requesting immediate search warrants for his home, office, and all electronic devices." The implications of Agent Chun's statement sent another wave of shocked murmurs through the packed courtroom. Several attorneys in the gallery began whispering urgently to each other, realizing that this case might have far-reaching consequences for the entire family court system. Judge Williams addressed the FBI agent directly. Agent Chun, are you suggesting that other children currently in custody arrangements involving Mr. Martinez may be at risk? That is exactly what I'm suggesting, Your Honor. Emma's testimony indicates that her father showed her photographs of other children and spoke about them in ways that suggest ongoing abuse. We need to identify and protect any other potential victims immediately. Emma, overhearing this conversation, tugged gently on Dr. Martinez's sleeve. When the trauma specialist leaned down, Emma whispered something that made the doctor's face go pale. Dr. Martinez looked up at Judge Williams urgently. Your Honor, Emma has just informed me that her father mentioned specific names of other children. She remembers at least 3 first, names of little girls he claimed were learning the games like she was. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the full scope of Marcus's potential crimes began to emerge. Judge Williams immediately ordered all court personnel, except essential staff, to clear the room, understanding that they were now dealing with information critical to an active federal investigation. Marcus, now fully restrained, but still struggling against the handcuffs, made one final chilling statement that confirmed everyone's worst fears. You have no idea what you're interfering with, he snarled at Judge Williams. There are people who won't be happy about this disruption to our arrangements. The word arrangements hung in the air like a toxic cloud, its implications clear to everyone present. This wasn't just about one predator and one victim. It was potentially about an organized network that had been using the family court system to access and abuse vulnerable children. Agent Chun immediately got on her radio, coordinating with her team to begin emergency welfare checks on any children who had been in custody arrangements involving Marcus Martinez. Detective Vasquez finished securing Marcus and began reading him his rights, though his continued threats and protests suggested a man who knew his crimes were about to be fully exposed. As Marcus was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, Emma finally broke down, not in fear, but in relief. The tears that had been held back by terror and survival instinct finally flowed freely, as she realized that her nightmare was truly over. Atlas, sensing the change in his young partner's emotional state, moved from protection mode to comfort mode, allowing Emma to bury her face in his golden fur. Judge Williams, watching this display of courage and resilience from a 7-year-old child, felt tears threatening her own professional composure. Emma, she said softly, what you did today, finding a way to tell the truth when you couldn't use words, that took more bravery than most adults could summon. You didn't just save yourself. You may have saved other children too. Sarah Martinez was finally allowed to approach her daughter, wrapping both Emma and Atlas in a fierce hug as the courtroom slowly began to empty. The custody hearing was over, but the real work of healing and justice was just beginning. Outside the courthouse, news vans were already gathering as word of the dramatic arrest began to spread. But inside Courtroom 3B, a little girl who had found her voice through a golden retriever was finally truly safe. 1 year later, on a bright Arizona morning that seemed to sparkle with possibility, Emma Martinez walked through the familiar doors of Courtroom 3B for what she hoped would be the final time. But this Emma was transformed from the terrified, silent child who had sat in the witness chair 12 months earlier. At 8 years old now, she moved with confidence, her voice clear and strong, her dark eyes bright with the light of a child who had not only survived trauma, but had thrived in its aftermath. Atlas trotted beside her, his golden coat gleaming in the morning sun that streamed through the courthouse windows. The magnificent retriever wore a new service dog vest, one that read, Therapy Dog, rather than Psychiatric Service Dog. The change in designation reflected the remarkable journey both he and Emma had traveled together. While Atlas would always be Emma's companion, he was no longer needed as her primary means of communication with the world. Judge Patricia Williams looked up from her bench as Emma entered, and the seasoned jurist felt her heart swell with pride. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Gone was the rigid posture of a child, trapped in survival mode. In its place stood a little girl who had reclaimed her voice, her childhood, and her future. "Good morning, Emma," Judge Williams said warmly. "You look wonderful." "Good morning, Judge Williams," Emma replied clearly, her voice carrying none of the fear that had characterized her previous appearances in this courtroom. "Thank you for helping me and Atlas save other kids." The reference to other kids was significant. In the year following Marcus Martinez's arrest, the investigation had uncovered a horrifying network of predators who had been exploiting the family court system to gain access to vulnerable children. Emma's courage in finding a way to communicate her abuse had led to the arrest of 17 individuals across 4 states and the rescue of 23 children who had been trapped in similar situations of systematic abuse. Sarah Martinez sat in the front row of the gallery, her own transformation equally remarkable. The broken, desperate woman who had fought for scraps of supervised visitation had blossomed into a confident advocate for her daughter and other trauma survivors. She had completed her degree in social work and was now employed by the Southwest Center for Traumatized Children, using her experience to help other families navigate the complex intersection of family court and child protection services. "Your Honor," said Jennifer Chun, Emma's guardian ad litem, who had become one of Emma's strongest advocates, "we're here today for the final custody determination and to request formal recognition of the therapeutic partnership between Emma and Atlas." Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Atlas's original trainer, sat at the counsel table with a thick file documenting Emma's recovery. Emma has made extraordinary progress in her healing journey. While she no longer requires Atlas for communication, their bond has evolved into something equally valuable, a therapeutic partnership that continues to support her emotional development and has shown remarkable potential for helping other children. Emma walked to the witness chair, not because she was required to testify, but because she had requested the opportunity to address the court. Atlas followed, but this time he positioned himself in a relaxed sitting position beside her chair, his tail wagging gently. The contrast with their first appearance in this courtroom was stark and beautiful. "Judge Williams," Emma began, her voice steady and clear, "I wanted to thank you for listening to me and Atlas when nobody else understood what we were trying to say. Atlas saved my life by helping me tell you that my daddy was hurting me." A judge leaned forward, genuinely moved by the child's poise and articulation. "Emma, you saved your own life by being brave enough to find a way to communicate when speaking felt impossible. You and Atlas worked together, but the courage was yours." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Atlas and I want to help other kids now. Dr. Martinez says we can visit children in the hospital and help them learn how to talk to their therapy dogs. Some kids are scared like I was, and maybe Atlas can teach their dogs how to listen better." The courtroom, which contained not only the usual legal professionals, but also reporters, child advocates, and representatives from therapy dog organizations, listened in respectful silence. Emma's story had become a catalyst for significant changes in how the family court system approached child testimony and trauma recognition. Dr. Rebecca Martinez stood to address the court. "Your Honor, Emma and Atlas have become the foundation for a new program we're implementing statewide. The Emma Protocol trains both therapy dogs and court personnel to recognize nonverbal communication from traumatized children. Emma has personally helped train 12 therapy dog teams and has assisted in developing educational materials that are now being used nationally." Judge Williams smiled at Emma. "So you and Atlas have become teachers?" "Yes," Emma replied with the enthusiasm of a child discussing her favorite subject. "Atlas is really good at showing other dogs how to understand when kids are scared or sad. And I can teach kids that it's okay to use hand signals when words feel stuck." Sarah Martinez was recognized to speak. Your Honor, Emma has not only recovered from her trauma, she has transformed it into a mission to help others. She speaks regularly at conferences for child protection workers and has helped develop training materials that are being used to educate judges, attorneys, and social workers about recognizing signs of abuse in children. The final order, Judge Williams signed that day, was more than just a custody determination. It was a recognition of resilience, healing, and the power of the human-animal bond to save lives. Emma would remain in her mother's full custody, with no visitation rights granted to Marcus, who was serving a 25-year federal sentence for his crimes. As the hearing concluded, Emma stood and walked over to her mother, Atlas padding alongside them both. But before leaving the courtroom, she turned back to Judge Williams. Judge Williams, when I grow up, I want to be a judge like you, so I can help kids like Atlas helped me. Judge Williams felt tears threaten her professional composure. Emma, I have no doubt that you will help many children in whatever way you choose to serve others. You've already helped more children than most adults do in a lifetime. As Emma, Sarah, and Atlas walked out of Courtroom 3B for the last time, the late morning sun created a golden path before them. Emma skipped alongside her mother, occasionally reaching down to pat Atlas's head knot in the desperate signaling patterns of the past, but in simple affection and gratitude. Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters waited, but Emma was no longer afraid of their questions. She had learned that her voice was powerful, that her story mattered, and that sharing her experience could protect other children from similar harm. Atlas and I are going to help lots of kids find their voices, she told the cameras with the confidence of a survivor who had become a hero. Sometimes when words get stuck, dogs can help them come out. As they walked toward their car, Atlas looked up at Emma with the intelligent, loving gaze that had first helped her communicate her desperate need for help. Now that same gaze reflected something different, not just protection and communication, but pride in a job well done and excitement for the important work that lay ahead. Emma Martinez had found her voice, and she was determined to help other children find theirs.